Welcome, my name is Amanda. I am 32 years old, and on the night of my father's retirement dinner, my entire life was set on a course I could have never predicted. What was meant to be an evening of polished speeches and polite applause became the moment that shattered the old patterns I had lived under and began a journey toward freedom that I hadn't dared to imagine. This isn't a tale of petty revenge, but of reclaiming my voice in my life after decades of emotional bondage. That evening, the grand banquet hall sparkled with elegance. Crystal chandeliers cast a soft glow over the polished silverware and gleaming glasses. Every guest in the room, from seasoned banking executives to family friends, had gathered to celebrate the end of Richard Harrington's illustrious career. My father stood at the center of it all, towering in his perfectly tailored suit, still every inch the man who measured worth in titles, degrees, and accolades. The room hung on his every word. He lifted a crystal glass high, commanding the room's attention. "My real children," he announced with pride cutting through the soft clinking of glasses, "are those who have made me proud." The words struck me like a blow, though I shouldn't have been surprised. I had lived under the shadow of such declarations for as long as I could remember. Then, with deliberate cruelty, his cold gaze swept the room until it landed squarely on me. His voice sharpened. "You can leave." A silence thicker than air descended upon the room. The sting of humiliation burned across my face as my heart pounded in my chest. It wasn't the first time my father had sought to diminish me publicly. But this was different. His words were meant to break me completely, to ensure that every person in the room would see me as the failure he believed me to be, before I could will myself to stand. To flee the shame, my husband Scott stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the polished floor. His voice, steady but charged with emotion, rang out. "No, I think it's about time everyone here heard the truth." The room collectively inhaled. All eyes turned to him, then to my father, then back again. And there, in front of Richard's esteemed colleagues and lifelong friends, Scott spoke the words that had been buried beneath years of control and fear. Calmly, deliberately, he peeled back the veneer of success that my father had so carefully crafted. He spoke of the suffocating demands, the manipulations, the way love in our home had always been conditional, measured out, only when perfection was achieved and withheld when it was not. The truth Scott laid bare was undeniable. It hung in the air, undeniable and raw. The proud facade of Richard Harrington began to fracture before the people whose admiration he had so carefully cultivated for decades. I had grown up in a household ruled by my father's expectations. Our pristine colonial home in an affluent Boston suburb was the picture of success from the outside, with its manicured lawn and grand piano, but behind its doors, life was a relentless pursuit of approval that always felt just out of reach. My mother, Elaine, once a bright and spirited woman, had been gradually diminished by the weight of my father's dominance. Her gentle protests had long since quieted to whispered words behind closed doors. She passed away when I was just 20. Breast cancer took her, though I often believed that years of emotional suppression contributed to her decline. My siblings had each molded themselves into the images my father had demanded. Jason, the brilliant surgeon whose every accomplishment seemed choreographed to earn our father's favor. Kimberly, my elder by 10 years, who climbed the legal world with ease, amassing accolades and respect, yet always seeking the elusive approval of the man who had shaped us all. And then there was me, Amanda, the outsider, the disappointment. I chose literature when my father insisted on business. I found solace in books and stories, not in numbers or titles. Even as a child, I gravitated to fiction because it offered an escape from the harsh reality of our home. I still remember my 12th birthday recital, my small fingers trembling over the glossy black keys of our grand piano as I performed for a room full of my father's friends. One wrong note, one misstep, and he had stood, adjusted his tie, and left the room, his disapproval as deafening as any shouted words. That moment branded itself in my heart. Perfection was the price of love, and I would never be enough. But that night, in that glittering hall, the unspoken truths that had suffocated me for years were finally dragged into the light. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. For the first time, I was not alone in facing him. For the first time, someone had stood beside me and said, "Enough." Not long after that night, I left Boston behind. I packed my life into a few suitcases and crossed the country with Scott, far from the weight of my father's shadow. In a sunlit apartment on the West Coast, I began to rebuild my life, not as the daughter trying to earn approval, but as the woman I was always meant to become. With time, I founded my own publishing house, one that gives voice to those who have lived through similar stories, voices long silenced by fear or shame. We publish tales of survival, of breaking free from toxic family dynamics, of triumph over emotional oppression. Through these stories, I've learned that there is immense strength in standing up for oneself and in helping others do the same. The moral of my story is this: the sweetest revenge is not found in returning cruelty for cruelty, but in living freely without the chains of someone else's expectations. When you reclaim your voice, your worth, and your life, you win a victory more profound than any public humiliation could ever provide.